This is an inclusive summit. We'd like to please hear all your questions, your comments, your thoughts, your ideas about what we're talking about. Because as Sam said in his opening address, the idea is to come up with deliverable action points that we can panel beat and then put forward to the various regulators or various authorities for us to move this better future forward, because that is why we are all here and what Zimbabwe really is looking forward to. So without further ado, please, if you can give them a big round of applause. Talking on leveraging digital data and AI to enhance financial services and capital markets. Our first panelist is Colin Tafumane, CEO Escrow Group. Please give him a big round of applause. He's also from the Committee of SADC Stock Exchange. Our second panelist is Wanda Mufunda, CEO Center for Humanitarian Analytics. Please, a big round of applause for Wanda. And our third guest, last but not least, of course, Dr. Innocent Matse, Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. Please keep clapping. You know how I am. If you keep clapping, they'll always get here on time. Welcome, Deputy Governor. Right, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, we're going to start off with Colin, the CEO of the Escrow Group, Committee of SADC Stock Exchange. Colin, I hand over to you, sir.
Thank you, Andy. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to ride on protocols already observed. A very good morning. It is such a pleasure and honor to stand before you and in discussing a topic that is quite pertinent this day and age. I come from the capital markets sector, and this matter is of absolute importance given the kind of statistics that I'm just going to share as my opening brief presentation. Estimated total value of real estate properties, that is private properties, is estimated to be around $85 billion in Zimbabwe. That is urban areas and all that. If we go to the rural areas, our farmers, small scale and all that, are estimated to be holding around 5 million head of livestock, valued at $3 billion. The biggest problem we have in the capital markets is capital formation. We have 1% inclusion in the capital markets. The financial inclusion statistics that always come up, they are consolidated, but when we disaggregate and we look at the capital markets, it is a sad story in terms of financial inclusion. That basically tells us that less than 100,000 people out of our 16 million people have exposure to capital markets that is direct. Of course, there's always an argument that if your pension fund is investing, then you are investing, but we are talking about direct access by our people. Our market capitalization consolidated securities exchanges at around, make up about 8% of our GDP. Now, why is that figure important? South Africa JSE's market capitalization is 300% or 3 times the GDP of South Africa, and that is what is supposed to be normal. Now, when you look at the transaction activities that we witness, a couple of just hand-picked statistics. The diaspora remittances, for example, 2024, reported to be just over 2 billion. That speaks to the capacity of our diaspora in terms of the liquidity. Mobile money subscriber base is around 9.53 million. That is a huge number in terms of financial inclusion. The total value of digital financial transactions estimated to be around 44 billion at some point and 7 billion US dollars. The question is, do we have a problem in terms of assets? I singled out property, I singled out livestock because this is idle capital. These are assets that are not being sweated. We also noticed that there are quite a number of transactions, but they are just for consumptive purposes. The biggest question is, without a strong capital formation base it is very difficult for us to grow our economy. How can businesses be able to have long-term growth being financed short-term, maybe medium-term, at interest rates of 15, 18%, not in ZIG, but in US dollars? This is the challenge that we have. Now, what does that mean in terms of the AI digital age that we are in? Fortunately, the convergence of the desires of AI and financial inclusion actually present the opportunities right before us. So turning the assets that I've just mentioned into securitizing them, basically asking someone from a rural area to become part of the capital markets, is obviously on the face of it a very tall order. This is where now AI comes in, where we are then saying, let's just look at tokenization. Tokenization as a concept is expected to have the tokenized assets are expected to rise to 16 trillion worldwide. Basically what it means is that the liquidity that I've talked about, as well as the asset base that I've talked about, using AI, using digital tools, you can convert that and actually address the financial inclusion by ensuring that the farmers are able to have their assets, the biological assets, securitized, and in so doing, a whole lot of other services for financial inclusion come in. Insurance can come in for the assets, life insurance, and all that, short-term insurance. And when you securitize those assets, you are now immediately onboarding them onto the capital markets, converting the idle capital into proper capital formation that is resilient, that is sustainable. The question is, do you force people to come in? It's a confidence issue. People have had bad experiences in the past, but how do we ensure that collectively we actually utilize these tools to actually use the resources that are at our disposal? I think the tokenization, from a regulatory point of view, this is where we are then saying, let's take advantage of the RegTech, of all the regulatory systems that can be available, just so that the first-time users, I've talked about 100,000, but yet we have 2.4 million farmers that are registered, that have livestock, that those can be mass onboarded, and suddenly and immediately they are part of the capital market ecosystem. And when you do that and you harness all that base, then you are able to now create a capital base that is patient capital that can be channeled towards development and long-term capital formation. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin, very much indeed for that. As I said, we will be opening up the floor to questions from all of our panelists, including Fayaz King, who spoke earlier, because as I said, it's all under the one topic. Right then, without further ado, our next speaker to give us a TED Talk is Wanda Mafunda. He's from the CEO of Humanitarian Analytics. Very, very interesting on AI and data analytics. Please, a big round of applause again for Wanda.
Thank you so much, Andy. I happen to come from a slightly different background, that of the humanitarian sector. And in that journey, I've also come across some of the very marginalized communities. And I flip back to some years when in Gokwe, I came across an old lady who I still just recall the name as Mbuya Bigi. So I'll maintain that name. But at the time, that was when mobile money had just been introduced, and she was meant to receive her assistance via the mobile money transfer platform. And she had walked 15 kilometers to get to a point where she could at least access the money. But I recall vividly her frustrations as a first-time user, when, upon arrival at the cash out point, she was told, unfortunately, the system is down. On that day, I remember she was really expressing how disappointed she was and the expectations that she carried back home of a family that had drawn out a grocery list of items that she was supposed to bring back home. But that was a different experience altogether, that disappointment. But in another community, in another district, yes, things were actually flowing, and you could tell there were actually platforms where even if there were queries, yes, they could easily be addressed, and it moved on. Same Zimbabwe, same platforms, but different experiences. What was the difference here? Trust. Because in the other experience, they really had an opportunity to be expressing some of their disappointments, and corrections were being made, at least in good time, and that raised the level of satisfaction. What did I pick as lessons from that experience? That the bulk of the financial systems that we have could actually be meant for probably those that are well-resourced, where the facilities are better, but not exactly suiting the hard-to-reach and marginalized communities. That was actually one of the key turning points. And we then have this huge anticipation that, yes, probably if the system works by the click of the button, fine, it gives hope. But sometimes it actually fails. And to a first-time user, failure then means it is the end of that relationship. They can no longer trust it any longer. But we want to then move away from situations where people are treated as mere transactions and shift that to a system where people are viewed in a more relational setup. How do we then do that? Feedback loops need to be part of our financial systems, where at least one can actually be listened to, and they can also air their grievances or give feedback that can further improve the user experience. Behavioral insights are also very critical in the marginalized communities, because you come across people with low literacy levels, but the kind of platforms that we have, the bulk of them, probably they're actually operating and using English as the language of interaction. Tumbuya bigi, then someone needs to translate that. Low connectivity environments, again, it's something that goes missing. I liked when Fires was mentioning that sometimes you don't need to be having your products and services geared towards those that have got, and I quote, $1,000 gadget, but really someone who has got a very simple one, Mbudzi, and that's the example that you gave. Transparency also then becomes critical, showing people that when they've got issues, yes, they can be resolved, and that builds the confidence. But the privacy and consent becomes one critical humanitarian principle Fires was talking about systems being built around principles, and private and consent is a critical humanitarian principle. So I have seen this, and I can attest to it, that when we actually piloted with some AI-driven sentiment analysis on some cash transfers, the drop-off rates fell by 30%. And the repeat usage actually doubled. Why? Because the system became quite responsive and trustworthy. So there are three critical aspects that I then picked that we need to make sure we onboard with our systems. One, that the first-time users who actually return, that's a critical matrix that we need to keep a tab on if we indeed are to ensure the system is trusted. Then the drop-offs shrinking, especially amongst the rural or low literacy users. They also need, again, to be faster, reliable resolution times, because sometimes the longer it takes to resolve a query, then there are lots of doubts that begin to come in. So what are we saying we can do together? I've tried to break this down and say, probably in the next 90 days, let's be practical and put this to test. Mbuyao Bigi and her colleagues in Gokwe, maybe let's see how we can empower the rural women with mobile cash transfers that are combined with very simple SMS feedback loops. That helps. And if we are talking about maybe some informal traders in Epworth, yes, they also would want to have an experience with enhanced AI nudges that reduce dropout. And if I look at probably some survivors of a disaster in Chimanimani, yes, such families, they need to have an experience of digital saving groups in real-time settlement monitoring. That, to me, are some of the things that we can even try out. Why? They are small. And so the rollout can be done. If we do it and we learn fast from it, failing safely, because I know there's a lot of risk management, but if we fail safely, we can actually adapt. And with the correct guardrails in place, we should then be able to ensure that the consent, the data minimalization, bias checks, and the escalation of mechanisms, if ever they are in complaints, these are addressed. But over the 12-month period, I think we can put in place, and let's commit to different stakeholders. To government, I see there that if we are then going to continue refining and creating enabling frameworks that have got the marginalized communities in mind, which will be a good starting point. If I look at the Mbuyao Bigi experience, it so then happens that the only other reason why she had to walk 15 kilometers to a point of cash out was because the infrastructure that could support her transacting from her doorstep was just not there. And when we look at our mobile money platforms, they're actually riding on the infrastructure of mobile network base stations, whose locations was initially designed looking at where can we make more money, rather than how can we be inclusive as a society so that everyone can also access the facilities. So, as industry, I'm also again saying, let's publish clear engagement standards that cover rural and marginalized communities, where even low-income users are taken into consideration, not just the urban elites. But to partners, there is also a stake where I feel the academia, the NGOs, the donors, let's invest in deep user research in marginalized districts so that we can design products and services that reflect real lives. And we need to have a tracking mechanism that probably quarterly can be tracking some key metrics. For instance, how many first-time users then become retained users, and drop-offs at critical points, disaggregated rural versus urban, and resolution and response times in low connectivity contexts. In closing, I would simply say, if we get this right, Mbuya Bigi in Gokwe, that displaced family in Shimanimani, or the informal trader in Epworth, won't just transact once. They will return trust and build with us again and again and again. As I take my leave, I say, let us make digital financial systems that listen, adapt, and prove that they can be trusted, especially for the marginalized, because trust is not just technology. It is what brings people back. I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Wanda Mufunda. Thank you for that incredible TED Talk there, CEO, Center for Humanitarian Analytics. It's very fascinating you talk about bringing products and services to somebody who needs it. I'll tell you a funny story. This is actually a true story. I was being told by a humanitarian organization. They went into the rural areas and they noticed that the ladies were walking 10 kilometers every day to get water. Okay? They would walk 10 kilometers every day, they'd walk 10 kilometers back. So they thought to themselves, you know what we're going to do? We're going to build a borehole and a well just 5 minutes away from where the women are. So they built a borehole and a well 5 minutes away. Fantastic. Then what happened? Nobody was using it. Okay? So the NGO was like, but you walk 10 kilometers there, 10 kilometers back, but no one is using this borehole. Huh? So they went to the women and they said, why are you not using the borehole? And the women said, but we have 10 kilometers to walk, talking to our friends. We get there, we chat for another hour, then we come walking back. I said, why do I have to go 1 minute and then come back and deal with my husband? And you see, so it was a need and a requirement. They needed that time to go, talk, do their things. Huh? Not 1 minute. Huh? Anyway, so that gives you an idea. Anyway, without that, I think that anyway, without
Andy,
further
may I catch
ado,
you there?
Okay.
Now, that's an interesting story, actually, because when you talk about these ladies and the need to be temporarily detached, I'm reminded of some early marriage advice that I received from the counselor when I ran into some marriage problems. And the advice to me was that you must take your wife out more often. As a couple, you guys must go out at least twice a week. And my response at the time was that we do go out twice a week. She goes out to church on Sunday, and I go out with the boys on Friday.
I think it's time to introduce our next panelist. Without further ado, someone who's always comes and gives the central bank's perspective, is willing to answer all the questions that we ask. Someone I deeply respect, the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, Dr. Innocent Mache.
Thank you very much, Andy. It's good to be here, and thank you very much to the organizers of this morning's event. Let me first say that I will be remiss in representing my my daytime job if I didn't say, first and foremost, let the room realize that the Zimbabwe Gold ZIG is here to stay. Let me also emphasize the fundamental principle of savings. You can only save if you believe what you've put aside will be safe. You can only do that if you think it will retain value. And I think this, given our experiences of the recent past, is key to some of the questions we have around savings and insurance. And I can assure the room that over the past 12 months, we have seen the Zimbabwe Gold stabilizing, and this stability is not synthetic. This is real stability and real growth. As they say, if you snooze, you what? You lose. This is the time to make that decision to save and invest. My previous panelists talked about two elements, securitization and tokenization. These are elements I was going to talk about, but because he has, all I want to say is that the economy has experienced tokenization briefly in the past, and I can assure you that the experience was very positive. So these are things that we can take forward, and businesses need to come to the party. The central bank tokenized when businesses were not tokenizing. So we need complementarity. The Reserve Bank is a regulator. So some of these pointers need to be taken up. The advent of big data, ladies and gentlemen, and artificial intelligence is revolutionizing the country's financial system already. By transforming its financial services landscape, we see positives that can be used by both private and public sector to propel this economy forward. High mobile penetration and a wave of technological innovation has transformed access to financial services. This rapid digitalization has had an impact on how central banks across the globe perform their functions, thereby enhancing efficiency, robustness, and expansion of financial inclusion. However, technology must make life simpler and, I dare say, cheaper. We have in this economy, we have not experienced these two things. And part of what the previous panelist was talking about is exactly this, that when we innovate, let's keep this in mind. Here I have in mind very simple things like a QR code. Why is it so difficult to put a QR code system at work in this economy? It boggles my mind. We already use QR codes all over the place. When we travel, our boarding passes, a simple QR codes enabled, and we don't use paper. By the way, the future can only be assured if we make today's activities sustainable. This is why the Reserve Bank is at the center of pushing ESG issues throughout the financial services sector. While AI offers significant benefits to the financial services sector, other players in the economy, its adoption hinges on public acceptance. And we have heard the previous presenter talk about public acceptance. Because public acceptance is not guaranteed due to the risks of algorithmic biases, data misuse, and fraud. This is especially critical for underserved users and first-time users, those in rural areas or with limited digital literacy, who may be more vulnerable to fraud or misinformation. Now, let me tell you about my own go-go. I was at Arundel Shopping Center in Pick and Pay, and there was this old lady in front of the queue, and she had a phone, and she was trying to make a payment. I mean, this ties into my QR code, use in our market. So, and she was trying to put in a code in there, and she couldn't quite see properly, and she basically failed to transact. And some good Samaritan, walked over, paid for her groceries, and let her go. And when I got to the cashier, I said, talk to management. This should be simpler than this. Why can't she just scan a QR codes on your machine and it's done? Why does she have to struggle like this? I went to one country, and I saw women seated by the pavement selling some fruits, and people were using their phones to pay. By the way, in local currency. So, here are opportunities, not only for financial inclusion, but also for expansion of our businesses. One customer missed or lost is key to every business. We should aim to retain all our customers. Digital trust can be enforced by establishing clear standards, implementing inclusive regulation, and ensuring strong consumer protection. Let me break this down one by one. Establishing clear standards requires building trust which is focused on integrity and creating sector-specific standards, especially for artificial intelligence. Trust is cultivated when users feel confident that their interests are safeguarded by fair and transparent systems. Achieving this requires a regulatory framework that is both innovative and protective, one that adapts to technological improvements while ensuring that accountability and inclusivity are key. If we think about AI models, you will think that because they are data-driven, making the data integrity central to their reliability will actually enhance their acceptance. For instance, financial services depend on high-quality data, which must be rigorously validated to uphold integrity of the financial system. However, let me pause to say, technology is changing and changing very fast. Clear and tailored standards can only be enforced through a well-developed digital infrastructure that is dynamic, that is open to continuous improvement. Financial institutions should implement robust networks, reliable digital identification systems, and accessible cloud infrastructure that is inclusive for all. These elements are essential to fostering trust and transparency across the financial ecosystem. As part of building trust, a robust digital infrastructure, the Reserve Bank has promoted interoperability of the payment systems infrastructure across the country. Seamless integration between mobile money operators such as EcoCash, OneMoney, Telecash, and others has had a significant impact on our economy. Earlier on, the issue of inclusion was mentioned, we need to realize that we can use digital infrastructure to actually enhance financial inclusion without huge costs. However, we have to understand that sharing infrastructure is key. I know that financial institutions don't like sharing, but I can tell you for sure that the future is in sharing infrastructure. Now, I mentioned inclusive regulation. What do I mean? An adaptive and fair regulatory system is critical in building what I call key tenets of trust. In the era of digital technology and artificial intelligence, regulatory arms such as the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, Securities Exchange Commission, Postal and Telecommunications Regulatory Authority, among others, should be stewards of innovation, driving digital transformation across the economy. To fulfill this role, regulators must embrace what my brother talked about earlier, principle-based approaches that encourage responsible adoption, but not to be a hindrance to innovation. By providing clear guidance and aligning regulatory practices with international standards, they can instill confidence in the market and foster sustainable innovation. In this regard, inclusive regulation and innovation are paramount to ensuring the holistic realization of gains from emerging and new technologies across the board. To ensure responsible innovation, the Reserve Bank introduced the FinTech Regulatory Sandbox back in March 2021, and we have seen some success with this. However, again, I want to ask business to come to the party. We need fintechs to have fintech festivals. We need to see activity around innovation. The sandbox was designed to enable regulation in the digital environment and facilitate the assessment of fintech products. But these can only be enhanced and taken up if business across the board comes on board. Let me talk about the last part, which is consumer protection. In the financial services sector, AI can be used for consumer-centric products, which include credit ratings, customer service chatbots, insurance pricing, and marketing. I want to pause here and say, we need to see a network of data centers in this country that can be interfaced. Once we have an interface to these data centers, a consumer can only approach the system once, and that information will be available to whoever needs it. I know that for this to happen, there is a need for an ID framework that can be used across the whole system. And that framework we already have. We can use the national ID. I know countries that have tried to create parallel systems. They don't work. Believe me, I lived through the M-Pesa incubation times and also the Huduma number for those of you who are from or who know Kenya. And both these, particularly the Huduma number, never took off. While these innovations offer significant benefits, they must be balanced with a commitment to ethical standards and transparency. The rights and dignity of users must be safeguarded, and it is a fundamental consumer right to understand how AI influences decisions that will affect their lives, especially in high-stakes areas like lending, credit scoring, and risk profiling. Let me just say that there are limits to these things. The first limit I can tell you is something that you probably all know, but let me mention it anyway. Argentina has the same economic profile as South Africa, but their risk profiles are different. Guess which one is higher than which? That for a country that has defaulted several times, or that for a country which has never defaulted. So there are other elements and factors that pop in. But let's not be dissuaded by those. That analysis should be done, and then those other factors can be brought on and can be argued back and forth. Responsible AI and fair data practices, as mentioned earlier, require digital finance providers to obtain consent for data collection and to safeguard that data from misuse. This is vital for building trust, as users are increasingly concerned about how their personal information is used, particularly in areas like credit scoring and targeted marketing. Let me end with a warning. And Andy, you may remember I made mention of this last time, which is, let's avoid collective stupidity. And I'm hoping that the systems we build will also avoid collective stupidity. I thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Governor. Let's avoid collective stupidity. I like that very much. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to open it up to a Q&A session. Of course, I really hope that we get some questions from the floor. Please, questions, comments, ideas. And of course, Fayaz King is available as well from the floor to take your questions. Right, so I suppose any questions to start, or shall I kick it off? Is anyone in the audience who would like to start the question? Oh, great, there we go. Let's go start with the back there, please. Can I have someone, ushers, old mutual ushers, please?
Andy, and as that happens, just a reminder to all those who are standing up to contribute, please introduce yourselves and tell us where you are from and what your role is. Thank you.
Right, the question is there in the corner at the back, please. Gentleman with his hand up. Right, Patrick, may I ask your assistance, Patrick? Could you go down? Thank you. Me and Patrick will do it. Right, while we're getting the microphone to our contributor, some fascinating insights there from our three speakers, as well as they've given us some clear ideas and guidelines what to do next, whether it be 90 days, whether it be in 12 months. They've given us a few ideas, which I am going to then expand on better. Now, as Patrick said, please stand up, introduce yourself, and continue.
Thank you. My name is Farai Mtambanengwe from SME Association of Zimbabwe. And I figured I should ask a question quickly before Andy asks all the questions again. So anyway, my first question is to, in fact, I would say all of the panelists, but especially to Fayaz. When you were speaking, you made a quote where you said, digital is the railroad, and then AI is the driver of the train, which is quite profound, and I think I get it. But then if we look at our Zimbabwean context, we literally have no railroad. And I'm saying this literally and figuratively. Our digital infrastructure is very limited and very prohibitive in terms of cost. Most of you were speaking about people using SMS, USSD, which is primitive. I mean, when you talk about digital transformation, USSD is primitive. It's not even in the era of your normal digital platforms, let alone AI. So for me, the question is, shouldn't our discussion be focused first on how do we improve access to digital platforms for the common people? Because I can tell you certainly most people, not only rural but even urban, the only digital access they probably have is to Facebook and WhatsApp because of the bundles. But otherwise, most people don't have access to data. Then also, my second question will be to you guys as, especially the financial services industry. To what extent are you adopting AI, particularly when it comes to lending? Because from an SME perspective, the biggest problem we've always had is when we come to banks, we are told you need title deeds as collateral, which SMEs don't have. But AI certainly provides a way to be able to risk profile, but to what extent are we looking at the adoption of AI platforms to be able to increase inclusivity, particularly to that low end? Then finally, we've got regulators here, or government representatives. Our regulation is also stifling in terms of digital adoption. Because if you look at, especially this new Data Protection Act, it's a good thing, yes, but when you look at the costs of compliance therein, they are unaffordable for most SMEs. And SMEs are supposed to be where this innovation happens, but the innovation cannot happen if the regulation actually stifles it from the start. Because if you look at the licensing costs, the cost of even getting those the DPO officers trained and so on, they're extremely prohibitive. So maybe those are my questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Farai. Yes, a round of applause, Farai. I appreciate those questions. Okay, right, let's ask you a couple more so that we can get onto this. Colin, your big ideas, I think, your two big ideas, securitization, tokenization, agreed. Trying to bring assets that are off the books. It's a very interesting concept because one of the things that I was discussing last week, ladies and gentlemen, is how do we bring Zimbabwe's wildlife onto our books? Because wildlife is an asset, an elephant, a giraffe. In a similar way, cattle is an asset which is not being sweated. They're just out there. They feed, you sell them, they die, and so forth. So let's talk about those two issues, Colin, if you don't mind, on those two questions. Dr. Mashe, I'm going to get to your presentation just now, but I want to talk about the elephant in the room, which I'd like you to reiterate and possibly re-emphasize what the governor stated recently about post-2030. I think that's critical. Post-2030, what happens to US dollar balances, US dollar accounts, what happens to US dollar contracts, particularly in the insurance sector? And if it moves to ZIG, how can we instill the confidence that as you yourself said, it's about retaining value? Okay, so that would be my question for you. Wanda, thank you for your presentation. You spoke a lot about data and about some of the issues you want to cover in the 12 months and so forth. One thing I didn't get from you was data analytics, data capturing, the amount of data we have, how we can leap from getting the right data in place and so forth before we can achieve an end result based on some of your 12-month predictions, which I will also go through as well. Right, I think we can start from Colin and move down.
Thank you.
Is it working?
Thank you, Andy. So I think the tokenization issue, it's a low-hanging fruit, actually. So what we are looking at is using some form of simplicity while actually turning it into sophistication. So just taking a simple example of the livestock, the securitization journey and tokenization, what we are just trying to do here is to look at how you convert that asset into an instrument so that there is a price or value discovery. Suddenly someone has a reference point to say, I'm worth this, which is not the case. Then you use buckets to make that asset liquid so that they can actually trade it anytime. And then in doing all that, capital markets are there to provide risk mitigation by providing security. Now, how practical is it? And the question was raised to say, do we have the infrastructure? I think the idea is what Dr. Bache had actually mentioned, infrastructure sharing. I did indicate earlier that we have about 9 million or so citizens on the mobile money platform. And that's infrastructure that can be leveraged on. And in so doing, I think it is very important to co-create the platforms so that we provide additional usage. So what are we doing about it? I think we have started doing that, talking to our regulator, and an approval might be on the way to actually convert those assets into securities. With that, we see a possibility that as various stakeholders, we use one platform to immediately give access to insurance, savings, credit, as well as coming onto the capital markets in one instance without reinventing the wheel. Almost everyone is on WhatsApp, and WhatsApp is a powerful tool in providing that AI-driven solutions that our people are able to onboard. For example, looking at the commodity exchange, ZMX, that we run, these last 3 months or so, we actually availed a WhatsApp bot kind of trading where just anyone on WhatsApp, once they register easily, they are able to communicate with the platform in terms of understanding the modalities of trading, pricing, and all that. And the majority of the trading was coming through that. So it can be done. That pilot has given us insights into how we can then expand it to bring on board other asset classes.
Thank you, Colin. Please, a round of applause for Colin. Thank you for that. Dr. Mashe, you heard my question about 2030, but let me just also throw a couple more at you. You talked about standards, sector-specific standards. You said standards, implementing robust infrastructure, inclusive regulation. And I think one of the questions that comes in, of course, is building up confidence and trust in banks. I think that's also an issue for citizens, isn't it? We keep our money in our mattresses and banks. So when we talk trust and confidence, we haven't even got to looking at insurance products. We're even just talking about the financial sector itself. DG?
Thank you, Andy. Okay. So, firstly, let me say that let me start with Andy. Balances, contracts, and insurance value maintenance going forward. So let me assure everyone, not only based on what I said last time, but also what the governor said last week, which is all our balances that are in FX and are sitting in your accounts, all of them will be maintained post-2030. All of them. They will not be a forced exchange for your balances. That's number one. Number two, all contracts that will be in US dollars or other foreign-based denominations will be maintained, and financing for those contracts will be allowed to continue until they run out. So any lines of credit can continue to be acquired, and they will be settled in the currency that they are contracted. So in terms of insurance contracts, I think you are thinking about what happens post-2030. Right. Let me be very clear. A local currency is a local currency. So all local contracts will be in local currency, including insurance contracts. Okay. I can think of a number of ways how the values of these contracts can be maintained. Firstly, the first is very simple. The ZiG is stable, ladies and gentlemen. Let me not beat about the bush. And this is not artificial. In fact, if you look at the numbers, since June this year, the ZiG has strengthened. So much so that there are companies that are realizing that having exchanged their ZiG for US dollars disadvantaged them. If they had maintained their ZiG balances, they would be better off. So why do I say, and why do I have this confidence? Think about it this way. As long as what backs the ZiG keeps increasing, then the ZiG will keep strengthening. Okay? And as I said earlier, the ZiG is backed, fully backed, several times over, I must say, by reserves. And these reserves keep growing. So, I think I've dealt with Andy.
Yes. You know me, there's always a follow-up, but not now.
So do we have trust in banks? Let me assure the public that Zimbabwean banks are 100% trustworthy. I can assure you this. The capital adequacy ratio is well above minimum for all of the banks in our system. So you can be sure that your money will be safe. This is why the Reserve Bank is there. When the Reserve Bank gives you this assurance, you will get your money in case whatever happens. Because that assurance is there.
Okay.
Let me now move away from Andy and talk about the primitiveness of our infrastructure. Let me say that the way that the Reserve Bank looks at our digital infrastructure is in terms of digital public infrastructure.
Okay.
This will be not only inclusive, but will assure fast payments, interoperability, and simple access to data. Not only payment data, but we need to assure each other of a minimum set of infrastructure across the board. And this is where both the public and private sector needs to come together to make this a reality. We are participating, we have joined many continental platforms that require fast payments. PAPS, for example, will require that we are able to do this. In today's world, central banks are also issuing central bank digital currencies. And it would be unfortunate for this economy to have a central bank digital currency without a reliable digital public infrastructure. So it is key for us to be able to be more innovative if we had these things in place. I talked earlier about things like credit scoring and so on and so forth. This can work if we can digitize and make our credit registry interoperable on a unified platform, or our collateral registry. The SMEs are beneficiaries to the collateral registry. In fact, they are the strongest participants on that registry. But we need that information to be publicly available so that the profiles of our SMEs can be shared across the whole financial services system. I think I have covered everything. Regulation stifling innovation. I don't think that it is in anybody's interest to stifle innovation.
Yeah. Before I let you go, Governor, you know me and my questions. You talk ZiG confidence. Yeah. And one thing I need to understand is when the central bank talks about the use of ZiG is increasing in the economy, people are getting more confident in it, I kind of get the feeling you're talking about business and you're not talking about people. In the sense that if you go anywhere in the country and you talk to individuals, they don't even touch the ZIG, they don't transact it. You go to a corporate, of course they do, because they can pay their taxes and so forth. So that divide in confidence of the ZIG, which of course is store of value going forward, that's why I bring up the ZIG in this case. Are there two different things we're talking about here? Because it seems normal people don't have confidence in the ZIG, business may have. Is that a true statement?
I actually think not. I had an experience. Let me begin with the experience. Somebody said, can I have some money? You can think about it in a positive or negative sense. And I said, well, I don't have, but if I had, I would, you know. He said, oh, even ZIG works these days. So that's your ordinary person.
Even ZIG works these days.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, again, I can assure you, ZIG works.
Okay.
Now, we're talking about two different things.
Yeah, two different things, yeah.
At least 90% of transactions in this economy are digital.
Yeah.
Okay? So in most economies in the world, cash is 5%. Cash in circulation is 5%. So the Reserve Bank puts its proportion at 3%. Right now, as I speak to you, there is 215 million ZIG cash in banks sitting there. So if any of you need ZIG, you can walk into your bank right now and get ZIG. If you don't find ZIG in that bank, let me know. Because they have 215 million sitting there.
All right.
And
There
I
you
will
go.
challenge your bank to make sure that this ZIG circulates.
Perfect. Thank you, Deputy Governor. We will challenge them. Right, Wanda, then I'm going to ask Fayaz to answer. Wanda, analytics, data collection. I mean, we're talking AI, we're talking its use to bring inclusion, digital innovation, particularly out to the marginalized or less established populations in our country. Talk to us about how we can digital innovate and how they can do it. Looking at some of your key issues that you raised in terms of what you want to do in the next 12 months.
Thanks, Andy. I think DG has also touched on one of the critical enablers for the data collection, which is actually the data infrastructure itself. So for us, one of the key aspects is that infrastructure enabling data collection. Currently, we have limitations with the access to the infrastructure. And I would also probably turn and say to government, that whole idea of the operators sharing infrastructure is something that we believe needs to be taken on board and be put into concrete action, because it is hampering data collection.
Now, you gave three very concrete issues that you'd like to commit to in the next 12 months, or what you hope different stakeholders will. Let's talk about government, and I think both of the panelists, previous panelists also spoke to this, enabling frameworks for inclusive data governance and recourse. I think the Deputy Governor called it inclusive regulation, building key tenets of trust, as well as implementing robust infrastructure networks, clear standards putting in place by industry. That's industry published clear engagement standards, partners, research into what is actually required in the marginalized areas. So just before I ask Fayaz to come in to answer some of the questions, just from your perspective and your 12-month key deliverables that you hope can be implemented, government looking at enabling infrastructure. That's already an issue. How do you intend we do that? Industry, together to put together standards, which I think as well, both of the previous speakers spoke to in different sectors, whether it be financial or not, and of course, partners. How do we find out what is wanted out there? What is actually needed on the ground? Because that's another issue, isn't it? We're giving products to people that don't need them. What products do the customers need?
Okay.
Thanks, and you rightfully the bottlenecks there. I think I'll continue picking up on what also needs to improve for us to have a smooth sailing. And the other aspect is really on the current data sharing protocols that are absent in a lot of cases, and that then leads to situations where there is duplication, and that's use of resources that could actually
Could you
be saved.
expand on data sharing protocols? What does that mean, like in layman's terms, if you're talking what?
Okay. For data sharing protocols, maybe let me cite with a practical example.
Yes, please.
I alluded earlier to one of the experiences and say, for instance, how can the systems work for a cyclone-affected community? Now, here are the critical elements where now we are looking at a population that is in need. And part of their need includes us having to identify who exactly needs what sort of assistance.
Right.
Now, that information may actually lie somewhere.
With a ministry or wherever.
With a ministry,
Right.
I'll say, for instance, DG was talking about maybe identification. But identification lies with Home Affairs.
Okay.
And yet it becomes a critical component when we are now trying to come up with a product that is then responsive and usable for disaster
I've got you.
response.
So it's similar to what the Deputy Governor was talking about, this integrated system which we can use it for everything kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Now, and analytics, data analytics. We're very behind data analytics in Zimbabwe. I know it's a big thing overseas. I think Fayaz, we can talk about this when we come to him. The use of AI to be able to make effective business decisions for your customers, be able to give the right products for your customers, that requires analytics and models to be built. Is that possible in our country, or are we behind the curve already and it's all happening in America or somewhere far away?
It is possible. That's the straight answer. But however, there is need then to cultivate the environment that will make sure we are ready to harness the potential of AI. And AI is most effective when we have got the right and accurate data sources. And in our case, this is still problematic. I can give you an example of where some of those challenges then continue to emerge, where for the AI learning process, they need to be drawing from some data sources. And currently, we have quite a huge chunk of our data sources in manual form. And so digitizing the data sources becomes a key entry point before we can then be talking about using AI. But also, the aspect of data literacy also becomes critical, because it's one thing swimming in the pool of data, but it is yet another then being able to get insights from that data. Yeah. And that's one of the things that we then try to do as Center for Humanitarian Analytics, to transform the data into actionable insights that can then inform critical decisions timely and accurately.
Thank you. Right, Fayaz, if I can bring you in. Is Fayaz got a microphone, please? Fayaz, you heard Farai there, how to improve access to digital products. What extent are we adapting AI and lending? Maybe you can comment on that from your experiences. and regulation stifling. It increases the cost of compliance, is onerous. And also, I think one other issue, which if you can add on top of that, skills. Like, where do we fit in this chain of AI? Are we the ones making the models? Do we have skills to export? Do we have the brains internally to work offline? Maybe that is the final fourth question.
Great. No, thank you, Andy, and thank you, Farai, for that question. A very provocative one. If I can just quote you, you said USSD is primitive. Again, a very, very provocative statement. But let me just put things into perspective. Let me put things into perspective. In 2019, I joined the UN as an Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director at UNICEF, responsible for field results and innovation. And together with Doreen Bogdan-Martin, the current ITU Secretary General, and the Broadband Commission, we embarked on a massive exercise. And we said that by 2030, we want to connect every school in the world to the internet for a cost of $438 billion. So we embarked on this mission. So if you've got your computers out, you're connected to the, the Wi-Fi and the internet, please go on to UNICEF Project Connect, and you can see the results for that first. Why am I telling you this? It's the foundation on which all digital, on all AI is built. It's built in the schools. You need to sort digital literacy out in the schools first. Before you become an SME, before you become a corporate, before you go anywhere, you start with education. Now, what does digital literacy mean? I think this is very important. It does not mean WhatsApp. It does not mean Facebook. It does not mean TikTok. It does not mean playing video games. So if you are purporting for bundles in these particular areas, then you are purporting for bundles or for data access in the wrong things. That is not digital literacy. Digital literacy is the Microsoft Index. It means you can do 4 things. You can send an email, with an attachment. You can do a PowerPoint presentation. You can do an Excel spreadsheet, and you can use MS Word. Your ability to use those 4 elements within the Microsoft Index will determine the level of digital literacy that you're engaged in. So if you're an SME, you should be purporting for data bundles or access on the data perspective in those areas, and not for WhatsApp, not for Facebook, and not for TikTok. That's social media. That's not digital literacy. That's not what AI is going to run on, and that's not what's going to build the economy and transform us here in Zimbabwe. So let's make sure that we address the fundamentals of where the issue is. Now, connectivity. You know, when somebody says USSD is primitive, we need to understand how a road is constructed. The graders will come in, they'll grade, and the first road you'll get will just be a bare road. Then secondly, it becomes a gravel road where you treat it with laterite, you compound, you compress it, you make it ready. And the third and second stage is when you put tarmac or you put concrete on it. USSD is that gravel road, that foundation upon which all AI, all data, all products and services are built on. So if you're going to be putting a tar road before you've even graded and prepared it, then you are going to have a challenge. So USSD, so important, you cannot ignore it. You need to design products at baseline so that people can enter first. When they build trust, then they move on. So for me, that is so, so important. The other issue that you raised as well was that of AI and the type of products that you can use. And you know, there's the issue, I think the governor mentioned it very clearly. It's called digital public infrastructure. And we have that here in Zimbabwe. And comparable to the rest of Africa and comparable to the rest of the world, it is robust, it works. And I say this tongue in cheek because I happen to have the privilege of having built that same digital infrastructure in Uganda, in Nigeria, in Malawi, in Zambia, and come home here in Zimbabwe and build the same infrastructure in my career. So I can attest, not by theory, but by pure practice. The other beauty that you have is you have a very progressive regulator. And I must say this about Potres. Potres is a steering wheel. they guide. They take decisions in areas and in places that are difficult where other regulators remain behind. So if you look even at that same website I gave you there, you'll see Zimbabwe, and you look at number of schools connected to the internet, and you look at the efforts that Patras has made in that particular area, and the encouragement of bringing other sector players, whether it's Liquid, whether it's Econet, Net1, all those people into the fold. So preparing this base and framework is so important. I think we must give credit where credit is due. Because connectivity is only one finger in the digital literacy pie. You've got content. Connect to what? To WhatsApp, Facebook, and TikTok? No. You want to connect to meaningful things that will build the economy. You want to connect to products or services that will enrich our economy going forward. And then the thing is, how do you connect? It's cost of devices. How do you connect? Is it the mobile phone? Is it an iPad? Is it a computer? How do you connect? And there are organizations here that can actually give you a laptop for $299. And if you don't have $299 as an SME to get that laptop, or even to support schools and get that particular laptop, then there's a challenge in that. So that's the other thing. The other element that's there is the actual literacy. You don't have the teachers who are digitally literate who can do the teaching. You don't have the people who are digitally literate who can go and inform them. How many parents are digitally literate that they encourage their kids to do their homework using the 4 Microsoft Index? I won't ask for a show of hands, but it's important that we look at that particular aspect as well. So let's give credit where credit is due. We have the foundation. What we need is to take advantage of it. The interoperability, very important. When you're interoperable, it gives you a chance to use resources that you would not normally have. The word I don't hear a lot in Zimbabwe since coming home is a word called open source. Open source software, where you've got bases and foundations on which you can use and build on. But for those who are in the IT and tech space, you know GitHub is available. You can go that route. You know it gives you that emphasis and that impetus that you need to take you to the next level. So with that, I think I've addressed your issue and just encourage you to give credit and to be positive, to be outward looking. And if I have to say it in Shona, I'll say, Chinjamagia Benda Butsu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fayaz. Right, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, thank you. Your Excellency, Ambassador Callum.
First, let me say this is so interesting when I hear Fayaz and others, the Deputy Governor and everybody talking around here. I've been in the trenches for 35 years. I've been all over the world. I've seen a lot. And there are two concepts that resonated with me so well over the donkey years. And that's the concept of, I was trying to write it when you were talking. That's the concept of securing trust and buying. These are very trivial concepts, but they are the undertones of transformation. They are the undertones of adoption. And they are the undertones of change. So, what did I learn over the years? One, what I've learned and what is clear is that transformation cannot occur without national ownership and trust-based partnership.
Okay.
Forget it. You will not secure any trust and no buying. So that's principle one I have learned in the trenches. Number two, earning trust is not transactional. It is earned through consistent engagement, empathy, and credibility. These are other clear concepts. The third aspect is securing buy-in, which is at the end of the game. It's not about convincing. It is, in practice, about aligning. It is about showing up with integrity, offering value, and also building relationship that makes you a true partner. Genuine. You operationalize this, you're on the road to transformation. But the more I listen to professionals, especially academia, they keep jumping on top of it. Like this, pa, 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 AI, digitalization, cha, cha, cha. You listen to Fires now. Everybody, they jump it. But he was trying to tell you on those fundamentals. He talks about foundation.
Right.
Yeah? So in these issues, you start from somewhere. You start from somewhere. So those are, to me, this is 35 years in the trenches. And those are two concepts I have been working on, especially about securing trust and buying. Not to become a politician, but just to become a good convener of knowledge when I finish this phase of my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Please a round of applause, because the Ambassador is 100% right. Oh, great, some ladies, right. There's lady, yeah, right and left. Yep, there and there. Thank you. Please stand up, introduce yourself, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Advocate Nyarima Shayamwembe. I work with women and youths. I'm also from the media. I love the conversation here, especially hearing about inclusion. And I love that my question was partly touched by one of the speakers who spoke about how inclusion shouldn't be about only probably getting from the communities, but also them leading. So my question, one of my questions, I've got a few questions. One of the questions is, how are we going to ensure that the women, the youths, are not only involved in putting their money, but also when we're talking about AI or any other such opportunities, we give them opportunities to own the means to lead in ownership. So that's one of the questions. And also my other question is, it's great that we're here as the thinkers. How are we taking these ideas to the people, to the grassroots? How are we going to inspire people to invest, to serve beyond this room? And then lastly, we're talking about, I think it was spoken about the issue of confidence. I want to talk about an issue that wasn't spoken about here. I come from a generation, I'm medium-aged to going down. There's a conversation about cryptocurrency. And I love that the Reserve Bank is in the room. And as we're talking about securing our investments, is this something that Zimbabwe is ready to talk about? South Africa is already trading in crypto. I think one of the speakers also spoke about how we want as a country to lead. And cryptocurrency is one such thing. I just want to find out what or how the room feels about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ma'am, we'll now come to the PS.
Thank you very much. Mine, I don't know, maybe there are comments mixed with questions.
That's fine.
With
Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Sandra Msevenzo from the Zimbabwe Association of Pension Funds.
Thank you.
The first one is a comment to Farai to say recently the Ambassador Mchangwa mentioned that they signed a tripartite of 1,700 kilometers of rail, so something is coming. And then coming to Collins, tokenization, it's an area that I've been reading about, and it's quite interesting. And when you find in markets, especially in Europe, and Dubai has been leading on tokenization, but Dubai has been leading in terms of property. So you have mentioned in terms of now tapping into our rural farmers and cattle. But when you look at this, it is some form of blockchain trading. And how are we ready to trade in blockchain? I think my sister also mentioned just now to say, are we ready for this as a country? And what does the regulation say? Then when we come to my director from RBZ, quite interesting in terms of the ZIG. We love the ZIG. We want to use it. We want to transact in the ZIG. I want to be proud to be holding Zimbabwean currency, my Zim dollar, holding it in my hand. Yes, we are happy. But as a follow-up question probably from Andy to say, when you look at the formal market, yes, it's okay to say let's change to ZIG. But now, the economy is highly informalized. We need to create confidence first from that sector, Because the moment they are not banking, they are not putting in their money through the formal system, they are receiving US dollars which are coming through the buses across the borders from Botswana, from South Africa. How do we then tap and create confidence in that? Then coming to pension funds, whenever we've witnessed that, whenever there's a currency change, there's value erosion, which affects trust and equity. So we are concerned as we are approaching 2030 to say, how can we build this confidence? How can we create trust in these investments that we are doing? Thank you.
Those are excellent questions. Thank you, Sandra. Please give her a round of applause. Those are excellent questions. PS, you wanted to, please can you give the PS the microphone, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. I'm just getting worried that I'll have nothing to say because after this I'm speaking about confidence. So
yeah,
I'm praying no one answers those questions, otherwise it will give away my presentation. But Andy, just to say that confidence starts when one trusts their own decision and the decisions of others. So when I look around the room, do we all trust each other in this room? That's the biggest question. Yeah. We've got industry here, the Reserve Bank governor, the PS to the president, the CEO of Old Mutual. We've got the head of United Nations in Zimbabwe. Yeah. And the question is, do we all trust each other in this room? Because if we can answer that question, Zimbabweans to realize you are all wearing borrowed suits. The US dollar is not your money. It never was, it never will. And at some point, you have to make your own suit. Thank you.
Thanks, PS. Well done for that. And that also means being innovative. So, Deputy Governor, you can probably touch, as you heard, we're going to talk about confidence after, but it's interesting, of course, Reserve Bank. I know you do a lot of things to try and instill confidence, to try and get people. Maybe just very quickly, because I don't want to take away the PS's thunder. Colin, we're talking here about blockchain, as well as a question concerning cryptocurrencies. And involve, I like this, involve the youth, women, persons with disabilities. We've got to involve everybody. No one must be left behind. I think that's also important. Take them to the grassroots and find out exactly how we can get them involved in this. And also, of course, a very good question is how do we get some of the things we're talking about today or some of the issues you speak about in your office out to the general public, and how do we communicate it out there? Right, gentlemen, let me start with you, Colin, and then we'll go down.
Thank you very much. So regarding the blockchain, are we ready? So the tokenization and blockchain are not one and the same thing. Blockchain is one of the options in terms of the backbone. Yeah. The concept of tokenization is to take an asset, have it secured and broken into small units. We do have enough frameworks in this country, collective investment schemes, various frameworks that legitimize that. Once that asset is under lock and key, you then have a mechanism of issuing. And we have depositories. We have one at the central bank, we have one in the capital markets, and we have been securitizing instruments. The only issue is, can an instrument called a token is it recognized? This is where the regulators will then need to come in to say, what is this thing called a token? That is the process now that brings in the regulator, and that is being worked on, sandbox options and all that stuff. Okay. As long as there is confidence that the asset is secure. However, internally with our structures and infrastructure, when we have confidence, we can do tokenization without blockchain. But we now want to be in the global scene. So if someone is sitting in New York and they also want to invest into that tokenized asset, their confidence will rise when it is now on distributed ledgers on blockchain. Yeah. So what we are doing is to do it in blocks and say, let's use the infrastructure that we currently have and just ensure that the regulatory framework recognizes tokenization. The issue of listing them, the structure, the infrastructure is there. Second phase, let's go blockchain so that our assets are then accessible internationally, and that will give them strong value and will also increase liquidity. Cryptocurrency is completely different, and these are virtual assets, and recognizing an instrument or a digital asset as a medium of exchange is now reserved territory. I think that's...
I mean, even if you take something like Bitcoin, just to quickly answer your question, if you take Bitcoin, the issue with Bitcoin is that it's not actually tradable anyway. Think about it. If you have Bitcoin, you can't walk into a shop and buy a hamburger. In some countries you can, but not around the world. So the issue comes in, what is it based on? It could be based on, what do I feel? Is it Bitcoin going to go up? Is it going to go down? So we don't have cryptos, but cryptos, they're working on a token. The central banks do have crypto tokens that they're working on. South Africa's trading, but but it isn't widely accepted. Until it's widely accepted, it's not really a currency. That's the issue about currencies. Anyway, Dr. Mate, maybe you can...
Well, I think we need to make a distinction there. Trading, if you commoditize it, it's being traded off a currency. You buy your cryptos with rands and all that.
US or...
That's separate from actually saying it's currency in its own form.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Sir?
No, I mean, I think it's answered that. But I just wanted to say, why are central bankers, careful about crypto? It basically goes to the issue of volatility. So you have here a medium of exchange, which is actually, as Andy says, not universally accepted. But let's just go past that and think, who takes responsibility when there is a wild fluctuation, right? Today, if you wake up and Bitcoin has crashed, who takes responsibility?
No one.
Okay, those are the issues that, and then of course there is the issue of exchanges popping up and then collapsing and so on and so forth. But those are issues that, need to be dealt with separately. As far as virtual assets in general are concerned, these are issues that are on the table and they are being discussed in various platforms. By the way, you can tokenize your whatever, in the virtual space, anything, Yeah. But you have to have confidence that there is a market for that token, right?
I think we've seen the tokens online with cats and things. Those are tokens, and they crash and burn because they're not secured. Yeah.
Okay, so my question is what?
You've got informal confidence, informal sector, creating confidence in that. And I think we need to talk about women and youth, but I'm sure we can talk about that during the course of the afternoon. How do we bring them into this innovative space? Right, I think, ladies and gentlemen, we have to call it there, but our guests are with us, I hope, this afternoon, so there will be more questions. So they'll be sitting down, so if there are questions for them, we'll jump them all in. But it just leaves me to thank our three panelists and, of course, you guys for obviously being part of the conversation. Colin Tafumane, thank you so much, CEO ESCO Group. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause. Before you go, we have some gifts for you. Wanda Mufunda, CEO, Center of Humanitarian Analytics, and Dr. Innocent Mashe, Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. Please give them a big round of applause. That was an interesting panel. It was so interesting, I went a little bit over time. Right, so can we ask them to bring up some gifts for our panelists, please? Old Mutual? Oh, here we go, thank you. Right. Guys, a big round of applause for the Deputy Governor. Thank you. Wanda, thank you. Right. Wanda Mufunda, of course, AI, Center of Humanitarian Analytics, looking at AI, data, infrastructure. It's very important what we speak about this. I really liked the conversation we had. Thank you. Colin? I liked what the Ambassador Callan from UN said. You know, needs national ownership. Earning trust is not transactional. Securing buy-in is not, it's about aligning with needs, integrity, and becoming a true partner. Thank you so much. Right, round of applause for Colin. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your panel. Right, Patrick?
Yeah, that's it. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And a lot learned there. You know, I always thought tokens were associated with what we got before lunch, but clearly there's some kind of development there. So tokens are also associated with wealth creation.
Or not in supermarkets.
Which is great, you know. And right now, I think the time we are going to pause the inclusion conversation and now talk about the infusion conversation as we go for lunch. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, what time is it and what time do we come back?
It's 12:41 now. If we can be back here by 1:30, I think we can kick off at 1:30 on the dot, if that's okay. Yep.
There we go. Yeah.
So what we ask is that the top tables, please go through for lunch, and then of course the rest can follow. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yep, that would be good. Yep. Thank you.
So enjoy your lunch. We'll be back at 1:30 to continue. So Group CEO and the top table, if you want to make your way. Linda? Guys?